Go. Give it a moment or two to catch up because it does seem to be slow to start initially on the live broadcast for some reason. Then click the play button.
Just
Welcome to your awakening. Please stay calm as your reality is adjusted.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was just checking on my YouTube page. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Yes, good evening. Welcome back once again. Another edition of Sol Excalibre on this moon day evening of the almost a palindrome, 22 of the 6 to 2020. So if you take the zeros out, it's 22, 6, 22. Yeah, kind of like a palindrome. Um, this Monday evening at 8 p.m. GMT, which is 2000 hours on the 24-hour clock. So again, we're getting, hang on, one more look at wrong page. That's why. I was looking for the stop screen sharing button. I'm looking at the wrong bloody browser because the way YouTube works now, I end up having to have two browsers open. One to host the room because I have to do that in Chrome because it won't work in Firefox. And then I have Firefox open to monitor the YouTube page and say hello to everyone in the chat. Hello, thanks for joining in. Not some throw. Hello, mate. I hope you've been enjoying the sun today. Although we've had sun in the Midlands, but elsewhere it seems to have been not so nice. Dan Conzio, hello. In Denmark, cool. And Ridiculizers in the chat, hello. Check out his songs. He's been putting up some great music recently. He's been working on mixing all his tracks and getting them bang on. So go and check his channel out and give his tunes a listen. The Rebel, hello, hello. And Paula, hello. Hope you're feeling better. Getting better every day. Day by day, I'm getting better and better. Cardini, hello, mate. I hope your green thumb is green today. New being, hello. In Sweden, hello. I hope it's going well over there. I'm scrolling down. Reality chat. That's Peter. He's in the room. Tazzy's in there. Hi, Taz. Thanks for joining in the chat and doing what you do. And Stewie, hello. And I think I said hello to everyone so far who's in the chat room. I'll try and come back to it again later, like I do. I know I'm not good at keeping up with it most of the time, but I do jump in and out and say hello. That's links to Dijon drug gangs in Paris. In France, in Dijon, in France. Go was just telling us about some of the craziness that's happening in other parts of the world, in Europe, in France, in that region called Dijon, where there's been similar to some of the things that have been happening in America with the Chaz or the Chop. They keep changing the name of it, the autonomous zone that's going on over there at the moment. It's been plastered all over the news media, being used as a well-timed political football for various reasons. But anyway, yes, on this Monday, nearly the end of June, and here in the UK, they still haven't exactly given any definitive official information. I listened to the daily update today. I actually bothered to spend the 40 plus minutes listening to it today just to see if they've made any official changes, and there isn't really much. There is a tiny thing which I'll explain in a minute, but they ain't really changed much. So even though we're now into the middle of the summer, literally the middle of the summer, because it was a solstice over the weekend, yesterday, Saturday and Sunday anyway, over the weekend was that solstice time of the year. But even though we're in the middle of summer, there's still pushing the whole, I call them guidelines, the bullshit guidelines, because even they themselves have been careful with the language that they're using, and they're not laws, they are advice. In some cases, they'll call them rules, but most often they refer to them as guidelines. So, in other words, you can just ignore them if you want to, supposedly, potentially. But then you have to take into account that a lot of private industry, private business, whether they've been told this from the top, in private board meetings or in memos, official documents, etc., sent from the government to the heads of these industries, saying you need to do this, 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 and this. The private businesses, the private companies, has been enacting restrictions based on the guidelines given to them by the government. So in some places, you can't shop without wearing a mask. In some places, they won't accept cash. You have to pay with some kind of credit transaction with a card or with your phone, something like that. And nearly everywhere is still enforcing the social avoidance rules. I think I'm going to start calling it social avoidance. It's not social distancing. They're trying to encourage you to avoid each other. So, I know we've spoken before about this kind of subject and talked about how social isolation, just the definition that they use themselves is an oxymoron, social distancing. But really, what it's about is getting into your mind this concept that every other human being, every other person around you is somehow a factory for illness and sickness of some kind. So therefore, you should just avoid people, stay away from people. Don't get too close to each other, and certainly don't do things like have sex or kiss or even hug. Don't even talk directly to somebody. You have to sort of talk to the side just in case you might, accidentally blow something there. There is social avoidance. But yeah, in the official announcements today, even though in recent days, I think it was last week or towards the end of last week, Bojo the Clown made a statement. I can't say it was an official announcement because, as you'll see, it didn't exactly go along the way he was saying, but he made a statement talking about how they were going to reduce the distance from 2 meters to 1 meter plus, which doesn't exactly make a lot of sense other than in a semantic manipulation of the use of language to give them a plausible deniability to excuse what they are doing. 1 meter plus basically means anything from 1 meter up to infinity. Because what's the plus? It's just more than a meter. It means more than a meter. How much more than a meter can you be? Well, anything up to infinity. The width of the universe. It's 1 meter up to the width of the universe. You have to stay apart by that distance. So you see what I mean? It's semantic use of language to give them a cover story to, allow deniability of culpability. For if somebody says, well, I was standing 1 foot 6 inches, 1 meter 6. I'm getting me measurements confused from imperial to metric. I was standing 1 meter 30 centimeters away from this other person, and I caught the illness. Oh, so it's your fault because you weren't specific. You said 1 meter was enough. That's why they put 1 meter plus. So then when in the later weeks, the following weeks and months, when they talk about the second wave, they can say how, well, people didn't avoid each other enough. We did warn you that it was 1 meter plus. We didn't specifically say just 1 meter, just 100 centimeters. No, we said 1 meter plus, which means there's that void of ambiguity. So then we can exonerate ourselves of any culpability for you getting the illness. So even though we claim, and I'm talking as if I'm politician, government, we claim that the experts are giving us advice, scientific advice that we then base policy on, And the expert advice is that, well, it doesn't need to be 2 meters. There isn't really any good evidence or data to back up this concept of 2 meters distance. So therefore, you could reduce it to 1 meter, which is just over 3 feet for us oldies that work in imperial still, about 3 foot 3 inches, 33. But they can have that excuse, so they can keep avoiding any responsibility for what they're doing. You see, like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't the government here in the UK that enacted a new law that said a business must refuse entry or trade with a member of the public who isn't fulfilling the requirements of wearing a mask and washing their hands in alcohol rub and whatever. The government didn't make any law that says that. But they've worded their advice, and in the back channels of the business industry, the messages are being passed, like I alluded to earlier, such that the people who run those businesses have said, well, we better enact these things, because otherwise the government might turn around and blame us for the public, for the customers catching the illness, and then potentially we could be sued by the customers. In a litigation society, they can take a civil case against us and say, oh, when I visited Tesco's, I caught the illness because you weren't enforcing the social avoidance rules properly. So, of course, business is protecting itself by enacting the requirements that the government said are just guidelines. So it inevitably becomes like a law, even though it's not written in law. It's not even an unwritten law, like LORE law. It just becomes entrenched into the societal structure because people are so afraid of being the one that's at the culpability end of that chain of responsibility or culpability. Hello to Linda Cloud as well. I saw that. I saw you'd say hello in the chat as it was scrolling up. I did catch that, and I'm sure I saw Dinny mention 1 meter 11. Was it 1 meter 11 centimeters? Yeah, 111 from the 1 to 11, which is, I thought that's a good way for me to sort of segue into why the subtitle this week, the factory default reset, I think was the way I worded it, wasn't it? Remember what I put in there. It is in my notes, but I haven't pulled my notes up yet. Factory default reset and ice cream for the future, which I will get into. I'll explain that, how that makes any sense. I know at the moment it probably sounds quite disjunct to the other statement, but yeah, the great factory default reset. Because in this environment of general confusion, I listened to the UK column edition for today earlier, a few hours ago, and they were talking about this point, and it's a subject that I've spoken about many times. I know we've talked about in these chats quite a few times. A lot of what is going on and what is being reported in the news media to us, the members of the public here in this geographic location we call the UK, Great Britain, and this is true in nearly every other country where all this bullshit is being rolled out. A lot of what they are doing in so-called government is deliberately meant to create confusion and to present a facade of confusion, so that for a lot of the public who have been entrained to rely on the media initially, and then the politicians that are the talking heads passing info to the media as being their authorities of truth and reality of what is happening in their world and why, they'll stay sort of in a state of confusion and learned helplessness because they don't know where else to turn or what else to think, because the media is just giving them messages that is leaving them continuously confused. Is it 2 meters or is it 1 meter? Do you wear masks or do you not wear masks? Are the masks safe for people to wear constantly or not? What medication works against the illness? Is vitamin C any good? Is getting out in the sunshine and getting vitamin D any good? Are you allowed to wave at somebody in the park, but only if you're more than 3 feet away from them? If you stand 2 feet away and wave, is that going to make them ill? You know? Confusion, deliberately. And in that, again, saying void, because it's an appropriate word to describe it, in that void of confusion, they can juggle the culpability hand grenade, the grenade of culpability, because they know that at some point in the future, potentially, these kind of things will be called into question, and some people may be held culpable, may be held responsible, may even end up being tried and possibly prosecuted. And I'm putting in deliberate sort of caveat language in there because I'm not optimistic that at any point in the future, within a sensible timeline anyway, that any of these politicians that have pushed this bullshit are ever actually going to get prosecuted for what they've done. And I'm basing that partly on personal experience of my life experience of seeing what happens in the world about this kind of shit, but also the historical evidence that whenever major debacles have taken place in politics, in society in general, it's very rare that people are held directly responsible for their part in what's happened. So, for example, the likelihood of somebody like Matt Hancock getting prosecuted for telling outright lies to the public on a daily basis almost, because it's not always him each day, but he's been the main talking head face of the government that they're presenting to the public constantly. He's not going to face any kind of responsibility for his participation in this bullshit. And if he claims to be in constant communication with experts and scientists, and the government is supposedly doing the job that you pay it to do as taxpayers, because they are your servants, supposedly, if they are actually doing their job properly, then they would be consulting the most world-renowned scientists and experts, all of them, not just the ones that suit a political narrative or agenda. So therefore, you would expect logically that if they are doing so, they would be more aware than we are about whether, one question as an example, is a mask healthy for somebody to wear continuously or not. They would have good information about that reality. Not the confusion of, wear something we're going to call face coverings, even though we keep showing you all these images of the terrible war scenes in the hospitals of these nurses wearing head to foot coverings with goggles and mask and hood and face shield and paper suit and gloves and everything. But you'll be safe if you just wear a piece of cloth over half your face, a face covering. Get a tea towel and strap it around your face. That's a face covering. And we want you to accept that bullshit is going to save you when we show you these images of nurses working in a COVID ward who have to dress like the way I've described. The sheer level of contradiction and outright blatant bullshit. There's no simple, nice way to describe it. It's just outright nonsense bullshit being sold to the public. But the expectation that they will be held responsible for that in any way is just, I personally don't think it's going to go anywhere. My only concern really is by helping to reveal or helping people to comprehend how, no, you're not confused. Your gut instinct and your logical thinking process is correct. What they are saying to you is a lie. It is bullshit that is meant to try and confuse you. Then, that process of helping more people see that for what it is and get out of their state of confusion, because the people they thought were supposed to be telling them good stuff, the truth, the facts, the detail, are just outright manipulating them. Getting to that stage will cause a change in the direction of the majority of people in society. Therefore, the expectation of holding those responsible genuinely culpable and prosecuting them or dealing with them in some fashion, the probability of that happening is going to go up, because more of the majority of your populace is going to actually see this bullshit for what it is. But while they still believe it, or while they still carry on in that ignorance is strength, ignorance is bliss, the news is so confusing, therefore I'm just going to ignore it and go along to get along state of mind, then guaranteed those people responsible will never be held culpable. The situation will never be resolved in any way at all. In history, when similar things have happened, like the foot and mouth outbreak here in the UK, and again, Mr. Crappy computer programmer Neil Ferguson was involved in the portrayal of that as being a potential pandemic catastrophe, such that many farmers were put out of business, many herds had to be slaughtered, massive amount of economic loss and damage, plus the fear of a kind of pandemic outbreak being pushed into the public. Did anybody get prosecuted for that? Did anybody in government get held responsible for the sheer economic loss that was pushed onto the public because of that? No. And you can keep, working your way through history, and you'll find plenty of cases where it's basically the same. So we end up back at what really matters, I think, anyway. So it's my opinion as a caveat. What really matters is whether the majority of the public buy into the bullshit. Because the world we live in is the world that we build. I'm saying we as that kind of, generalization of all of us. We're all in it together. Nobody gets out alive. We're all on one big lifeboat called Earth. The majority believing in the bullshit means we'll build a society that creates a foundation of so-called truth, mistruth, based on that bullshit. So in other words, we'll adjust our entire society to work around this false belief that this bullshit exists and is real and is a danger to everyone. So shopping will become the way it has been recently, where you have to stand in a queue and you have to go in a few at a time and you have to pay with a card or a phone or something and all the other bullshit. The world will become like that. Or if the majority of people start to see it for what it is and start to carry on about their day, basically. I like to use that phrase because it's just sort of like, people do what they do. Lots of people doing lots of different things, But if people just carried on about their day, then that world of the pandemic, the pandemocracy world, will never be built because people will be building in a different direction. So we come back to the subtitle. The factory default reset. In the state of confusion that's been happening for the past month plus, because we sort of got past the bridge of fear, the hump of the fear that they were pushing onto the public. And now we're coming into the summer months. I talked in recent episodes about how now we're approaching the summer months, they're going to find it harder to manipulate the numbers of illnesses and deaths, mortality rate, etc., because it's the summer. And most of the bullshit they're selling is based on the seasonal influenza. So therefore, as the seasonal influenza dies away, the numbers will go down. They'll find it harder and harder to fraudulently create those numbers because it will stand out more obviously to all the thousands of people that work within the medical industries. So they've got to change their tune. They've got to change the narrative to account for that, but to still keep the ball rolling towards their agendas that they're trying to push. So the narrative changed slightly, and we started getting more of this kind of confusion level of, well, do we do this? Do we do that? Is it 2 meters, 1 meter? We want everybody to go back to work, but we also want you all to stay apart from each other. Go to work, but work from home if you can. All that usual confusion shit that you've heard them say in the last few weeks. that gives them the then plausible deniability to keep kicking the can down the road, to keep the ball rolling, and to have that threat of lockdown constantly there and or certainly accepted as being available by the public, accepted by the public, that it is an available constant option for the government to reenact a heavier lockdown. They'll make a story about, oh, there's a new outbreak over here, we'll do lockdown, and the public is in the mindset to accept it because of recent history, and in a state of confusion when their very life being is threatened. When you're under threat of death or threat of your well-being, then if somebody says you will be safe if you do this, you are more likely to go with that option, especially when everything seems so confusing about what you are or are not supposed to do. This now gives them a bit of time to keep kicking the can down the road while perpetuating the need for these changes in society. And now, the last few weeks, certainly, I know that this goes back in time, and other people have pointed this out over the past few months a few times, but it's becoming more and more of a talking point now. It's been presented more and more often, and it's been pushed into the public consciousness more and more. And that's this idea of the Great Reset. With some of the situation as it's occurring in the USA at the moment, it is, as I say, it's a common topic of discussion, and it's something that is constantly being presented to the public in the media in one form or another, either in little news articles or in kind of like semi-documentary presentations, talking points, etc. This idea of the Great Reset. And as I said, other people have covered this over the past few months, and they're pointing you towards the World Economic Forum as one of the main places to, if you want to go and look into this subject and a lot of the propaganda that's being pushed about it. But I haven't heard anyone yet, and this is what led me to talking about it today, this evening, because they're starting to sort of subtly drip this more and more in front of the UK public. This idea of a great reset needs to happen. The way society works has to change, but they're not at the same time admitting or being upfront with the public of like, yeah, the society needs to change in the direction that we're telling you to change it. And that is encapsulated by that Great Reset documentation and concept and ideology, I suppose you could call it as well. It is sort of encapsulating like an ideology that certainly suits the controllers. It suits the agendas that they have been pushing for 100 plus years, pushing towards for over 100 years easily. But I've not heard anyone recently, if at all, ask the question of, well, if you're talking about a great reset, then to reset something means it had an original default setting in the first place. Like a machine, it has its factory default settings before it's sent out to the consumer or made use of in an industry somewhere. And if something, if eventually faults and problems build up until you end up wanting to press the reset button, that means you're going back to factory default settings. So in other words, saying the Great Reset is the same as saying, let's go round in a circle back to the beginning. Let's reset everything back to how it was when the machine first started ticking over, when the machine was first turned on, which can become a highly debatable subject of, exactly what point in history sort of is like the turning on moment for this current bullshit that we're being subjected to. But that's part of that demonstrates how the very terminology is part of the deception. Because when they say Great Reset, they're not talking about a Great Reset. They're not talking about let's all go back to, for example, the 1950s and live the way everybody did in the 1950s. Let's change all of the infrastructure and societal setup so that it's like the 1950s again. No, they're not talking about resetting like that. They're not talking about even going back to what could be argued, or claimed to be the beginning of the current machine, which would be back to probably the 1700s, maybe the 1600s, the end of the Renaissance, beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Maybe you could argue maybe that that's sort of a very, very defining point in world history in terms of modern societies, that beginning of the great industrial revolution. But they're not talking about that, are they? No, it's deliberate semantic manipulation of language, NLP manipulation. Oh, sorry, I had to lose Gary. Obviously, the internet cafe has closed up already. So thanks for joining in, Gary. Take care. See you again through the week on Wednesday, hopefully. But yeah, they're not talking about resetting back to a point in time previously. They're talking about changing the way society operates now and changing it in such a way that it follows certain ideological precepts or concepts, foundational concepts. I've talked so much over the years about the ideas like technocracy and what some people call communitarianism, but it's kind of like technocratic socialism, and how there will be no property, there'll be no money, there'll be no personal property at all of any kind. There will be intellectual property, but it will never ever belong to you. It will belong to a community owned cloud thing that is owned. It is actually owned by people who are controlling the system from above. Just like has been demonstrated in so many other countries that succumb to that kind of totalitarianism, even though they may deceive the general populace into thinking that they're all sharing everything. Where it's like, no, some pigs are more equal than others, in their method of creating these structures. Guaranteed, there's always an opportunity for some pigs to be more equal than others. That's what Orwell was describing when he wrote Animal Farm. So this concept of the Great Reset is nothing about like, oh yeah, let's go back to before all the craziness began, and we can live in happier times, romanticizing the past. It's about radically changing the current structure of society. We were obviously chatting just before we started on air, and chatting with Days, and he mentioned how some places are calling it the Great Restart, or they're wording it in different ways rather than saying reset. But the general sort of narrative, as it's been pushed for the past several weeks, months, has been this label of the Great Reset, and pushed by the agendas that have been documented in places like the World Economic Forum. And now, emanating in the real world around you, being demonstrated to us on a daily basis, is this self-fulfilling trap that they have created. Because let's say you own your own business, you want to stay in business. The way the world is changing, you want to keep being able to earn your living and pay for your food and bills and whatever, look after your family. So you want your business to keep going. You've got the kind of business that's still appropriate in this so-called new future, but you're required to fulfill all these rules, making sure your customers wear a mask and making sure there's only so many people in the shop at a time and blah, 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 blah. So you're expected to do all that, to go along, to get along, to be able to carry on being allowed to run your business and earn a living. So what choice have you got? You don't have any choice. You either go along with it so that you can carry on trading and doing what you do, or you succumb to the steamroller effect and you end up being made unemployed or unemployable, and you get shuffled onto state supply, state benefits of some kind or another, whether it's a universal credit kind of payment or something else. But the way they've introduced these concepts for the majority of people in business, even if you're a genuine human being just trying to live your life and do your thing and provide a commodity or a service to the public, and that's how you earn your living. You ain't left with much choice about what you do about this situation. Because, as I say, if you want to be able to carry on doing what you do, you've either got to go along with it or you've got to walk away from it and end up being subjugated to the agenda anyway. You get dragged along by the direction that it's going in its wake. And they've done that deliberately. So, like I was describing earlier, it means none of the politicians can be held directly responsible because none of them have actually penned a new law that has caused this stuff to happen. None of them have penned a new law that says all the elderly must be rounded up and put into care homes where they will not be taken care of properly, such that they'll end up dying en masse. No, because then they could easily be prosecuted for genocide. So instead, they did it by, oh, we're giving you advice. We're asking the NHS if they would do this for us, but then we're not providing enough supplies or funding to them so they can actually succeed in doing what we're asking them to do. So we're setting them up to fail, and that failure then becomes a justification for us saying we need to enact this new way of the world, this new way of living, this new way of interacting with each other. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And the process of that being emanated now into the world, into the reality around us, it's had at least 2 months plus to be established, because officially the lockdown didn't start until March. Interesting, the March 3/11 date, the 11th of the 3rd and all that stuff. But anyway, that could be another whole rabbit hole to chase, a rabbit to chase down yet another tunnel. But the point is, we can see a lot of this stuff has been put into the system, put into the world, into society by the system now for 2+ months, such that it's got to the stage where for a lot of the public, they see no other choice. They see this as being, well, this is the way it is now. This is the Great Reset. This is now the opportunity for us to start building a new future. That's the way the public is given. The impression of it is that they have a choice in this. I know it might sound a bit self-contradictory, but I'll explain myself. They're given an illusion of choice, that the politicians are only enacting this process because the public want them to. So in other words, the servant has persuaded the master that the master actually wanted the servant to stab him in the ass. It was the master's request that the servant should stab the fork into his buttocks, wasn't it? Yes, you did, master. You asked me to, didn't you? It's that divesting of karmic responsibility. So for a lot of the public, they feel like, well, yeah, we need the social avoidance distance, don't we? Of course we do. We need everybody to wear masks, don't we? Of course we do, because the experts on the telly are telling the politicians to tell us that we've all got to wear masks. Well, I should say face coverings. What is a mask? A face covering? What is a face covering? A mask? If I pull my beard up like this, and I get a hairband and attach it to the centre in my spectacles, does that count as a face covering? Can I walk around the shops like that? Yeah, and everybody will be all right. Yeah. Well, I'll be breaking the rules if I do that. So a lot of the public I keep saying the majority, because I think unfortunately is still a majority of the public are falling for this bullshit. I think the numbers of people who are starting to outright question it or call it out is growing daily, because the stuff is getting so ridiculous that more and more people can see it more readily, because it is so obviously ridiculous. But then talking about people accepting that kind of bullshit and enacting it. And as I mentioned earlier, we build the world we live in. The way we live and interact with each other, the structures that we build, which are not just necessarily the physical stuff, the buildings and whatever. There are non-physical, metaphysical things that we build with each other, relationships, concepts, morals, ethics, trade agreements, alliances. These are things that don't necessarily exist in any physical sense, but they become intrinsically part of our societies and how we interact with each other. And they can affect the direction of the future. They can affect the way the future develops. But a friend contacted me over the weekend, sent me an email describing a situation they'd experienced. And I said, I wouldn't say any details about this because, the internet being the way it is, there are unfortunately a lot of unpleasant people out there who exploit information, but no details. But what's important is what happens in what they're describing, in the situation they're describing. When some of the announcements were made basically saying we were now allowed to go outside in the sunshine, to go out for the day, maybe go down the park, as long as you stay at a distance from everyone else and all that bullshit. So my friend decided they were going to go out with their grandson and another friend with them, and they would go out for the day and have a day out. Enjoy the weather and have a wander around and whatever. And at one point, they were going where they were going in a vehicle, in a car, and they pulled up. They wanted to, well, the kid wanted to get some ice cream, and a friend wanted to get some ice cream as well. So they went to a little outlet, a little shop front to buy some ice cream. And the grandson had some money, cash money. And when he got to the counter, he's like, "Can I have some ice cream, please?" And the order follower behind the counter said, "Oh, we can't accept cash. Only card transactions are allowed." And he's talking to this kid's like 10 years, let's say 10 years old again. No details required, but he's a youngish child. What did the person behind the counter think when they said that to a 10-year-old child? Did they think that a child would have a credit card? Did they think that a child would have a phone? Maybe a phone, yes, but a phone with some form of electronic credit on it such that they could pay not with cash, but with the phone. When the kid's got cash money in his hand, now obviously whoever's working behind that counter had been told by that business, maybe that was the person who ran the business, maybe it was a single owner operator kind of setup, but they'd been told to not accept cash on the day of them opening and running that day. Maybe they'd even, not got a float in the till, or even got a till that was turned on and working or anything. They were expecting all credit card PIN payments and whatever. Which means for the person behind the counter, maybe they're in a situation where they're just unable to accept cash because the owner of the business has set it up such that there is no way to exchange trade for cash. Maybe. But if that were true, I think then the person behind the counter would, in some way that was possible for the child to comprehend, to understand, they'd say that to the child. They wouldn't just say, "No, don't accept cash, you got to pay by card," and then tell the child to move out of the queue because he's blocking like the people who want to pay waiting with their card. And then of course obviously the child feels confused, pretty much traumatized basically, because they're in a state where for a child of that age they've got no comprehension of what's going on in the adult world, in that sense around them, of why are they being told this. Why is it like, I've got money, I know I'm only 10 years old, but throughout my life I've been told that the money is what we use to exchange for the goods that we want in a shop. So here I am with my money and I'm asking, all I want is an ice cream, but they're telling me, no, you got to pay with a card or get out of the queue, get out of the way. That's pretty, certainly sociopathic on the part of whoever it was behind the counter. Possibly even psychopathic. That's debatable because you'd need to know more about them. But certainly that level of social interaction and the way it went about, the way it happened, is an example of sociopathy. And if the societal infrastructure that we're being told needs now to be built because of the walrus, the corona walrus, then what they are suggesting is that we should be building a sociopathic society where people are considered intrinsically dangerous and unclean, like a leper. You know, you have to walk around with your little bell, ringing your bell, and unclean, unclean. That's sociopathy in many ways, in many descriptions, in many diagnoses of that terminology. And just the perception of treating a child in that way, in that kind of situation, demonstrates sociopathy again. The person behind the counter had no empathy whatsoever. He just wanted that child to get out the way. You know, get out of the way so I can trade with these people that are waiting. You know, I'm sure you could make various excuses about, oh, maybe they've been really busy, maybe they were rushed off their feet, maybe they were confused and didn't react very well. Loads and loads of excuses. But all of them would be poor excuses, because that's quite a simple situation for most people to deal with in a way that wouldn't dump on that child and dump on that situation. That's why in the subtitle this week, because that extra, I said it would eventually make sense once I explained this kind of like backstory to it. Ice cream for the future, because hopefully you get the double meaning, the connotations in the phonetics of the word ice cream for the future. The bullshit that they are telling us, and the direction with this idea like the Great Reset, which is just dissonantly confusing just by its poor terminology, but also by this idea of, well, you're not resetting anything. You're not resetting it because it's never been that way. So therefore, we're not going back to a previous setting, are we? You're trying to set up something completely new. This is like the great replanning, not the great reset. What they're trying to persuade us to do is to build a certain style of society that would absolutely be intrinsically sociopathic in its infrastructure, in the way we are expected to treat each other. Because now the machine itself, the mechanisms, have more value than the people who actually operate those mechanisms. The machine ceases to be if all the people leave. If you think, if you do a kind of micro example version of the situation, if we were all living on an island and the machine existed on the island, but then all the people left because they got so pissed off with the way the machine was operating, the machine would cease to operate because there's nobody there anymore to operate it. It cannot exist on its own. It only exists in a conceptual fashion. Yes, there are laws and certain things like the judicial structure and the institutions that constantly support it and repeat it and prop it up. The ideologies keep getting repeated, therefore they carry on with a seeming immortality. If they were, I know they'd like to say corporations are a living person too. Yeah, but they have a level of immortality because they are paper-based concepts only. They don't exist in a reality. They're not a physical thing with a life force to it. They are purely a concept that only continues as long as people keep perpetuating it. So they're trying to persuade us, they're trying to trick us into building this society that will be intrinsically opposite to the well-being of people, because it sees people as being detrimental, unclean, infectious, inefficient. It's just detrimental to the operation of the machine. But in a paradox, the machine itself cannot actually operate without people being around to press the buttons and pull the levers. So the machine needs us more than we need it. And this has been perpetually true since all of this bullshit started millennia ago. Yeah, there can be no monarchy without the subjects that support that monarchy. Yeah, it's like some guy in the wilderness in a desert with a crown on his head going, I'm the king of the desert. Woo. If there's no subjects, there is no monarchy. You can have a monarchy in his own head, stomp around the desert claiming to be king of the world, but king of what, mate? You're a king of a sand dune. So the machine itself needs us far more than we need it. Human beings, people, mankind has been existing for hundreds of thousands of years before this thing that I refer to as the machine, the system, started persuading us to build it. This is where you can, if you want to, look into the kind of the spiritual aspects to this and how some religions present these kind of ideas or have appropriated the concepts and turned them into their own theological versions of it. Because being the solstice weekend, yeah, it's the time when certain religious groups decide to pay homage to the sun in one way or another. And for some religious belief systems, the sun has a lot more meaning to them than others. And lo and behold, this year, and I think partly this is another example of how the moral level of society in general has reduced, has dropped, or been pushed down, been deliberately subdued. But also, it could be that this is just part of the show, the theatre, that they know will create more chaos. It will create more fear in certain demographics of the public. But anyway, over the weekend, and as far as I saw, this was only happening in the USA. It wasn't. I didn't see any sort of news about this going on anywhere else. But in certain cities in the USA over the solstice weekend, they were having Luciferian rallies and marches and gatherings and parties, to celebrate the fact that it was the solstice, it was the 21st. And certain demographics of the USA media was, on top of this, classic kind of Christian demographic was pointing at it, going, look, all the Luciferians are out. Look, it proves the Luciferians are doing this. Look. That's what I say. Some of this could have been just deliberate feeding of the propaganda narrative because they know it will create a reaction in certain demographics. But at the same time as saying that, I'm not denying the reality that the general moral demeanor of most of the world's society has gone down. So the very idea that for supposed religious freedom, you should allow religions that personify the abuse and subjugation of others to be allowed to, promote themselves. It's the equivalent. It's counterproductive in the sense of it's the equivalent of promoting slavery at a Black Lives Matter rally. That's the kind of juxtaposition that it creates, and that's why I think more than likely this was all just bullshit being promoted over the solstice weekend just to try and whip up some more angry further in the Christian demographic primarily, but in others as well, considering the other chaotic situations that are happening at the moment, like the deliberately pushed race baiting concepts, the Black Lives Matter rallies, and the white nationalists so-called gatherings and whatever, even though most of them were not white nationalists. But you know what I mean. It's the way it's presented in the media. The media presents these ideas of there being the two polar opposites that are fighting, so you have to choose a side. Interestingly, I was listening to somebody mention about how they had come across some documentation from a while ago that was supposedly from the left, in that left-right paradigm bullshit. But some activists, we'll call them that, had put together this document that was like advice on how to organize a movement and push a movement and stuff like that. And it's very much like the color revolution stuff all over again. But in that document, they were directly explaining how and why they deliberately create two sides and get them to fight each other because they know psychologically this causes the public to feel that they have to choose a side. So in that Hegelian process, they get you in the left, right. That's them getting you marching in the direction that they want, because they're the ones choosing which left and right you are presented with. And the media is their trumpet to project that into the public's mind. So I scream for the future of the Great Reset. It's up to the general populace, and that doesn't mean that does not include you. When I say general populace, that basically means everyone, apart from those that are working in some very specific roles or trades, who will carry on what they're doing regardless anyway. It's like there will always be a need for grave diggers, although eventually their jobs will be automated to a large degree. But as people, for a while yet at least, maybe we'll still need to dig graves or cremate people or whatever. So there'll be need for funeral services of some form. Jobs like that will carry on, even if the shape of society changes a bit, until they start perfecting their transhumanist immortality or pseudo immortality. Then maybe the funeral services will go out of business. But the general populace decides what shape society takes. And if you're looking, I'll talk from my own point of view, because I don't want to project on what other people should think or shouldn't or whatever. I look at this situation, I see how they're presenting the public via the media. They're presenting this bullshit excuse that is, it's not even a level of a quality lie that would be equivalent to a teenage schoolboy, who's trying to get out of being put in detention for something they've done naughty. So they come up with some lie to excuse why they were doing what they were doing. It's not even as good a lie as that. This is the kind of lie that a 4 or 5-year-old tells you when you catch them with chocolate smeared all over their face and you say, "Did you eat all the chocolate?" And they go, "No, the leprechauns took it." That's the kind of level of bullshit that they're presenting to the public, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not an expert in medical stuff in any way whatsoever. I've got a small amount of knowledge on those kind of subjects. But just from the little bit of knowledge I have, and looking at the information and listening to other people that have been digging away at this information and finding lots of good resources to demonstrate this stuff, the bullshit that the government has been selling for the past few months is literally just that. It's a bullshit excuse. And that bullshit excuse is just being used to persuade people to start building a new house, basically, a new style of house that we're all going to be sharing. And that new style of house is going to be sociopathic. If you're not a sociopath before you enter that house, you will be once you moved into it. You'll be forced to be. And they'll use behavioral modification techniques on you to make you agree with the bullshit that they are doing, or to give you the illusion that you freely chose to participate, you freely chose to move into that house. That is how they are manipulating the public to create a new future that they will call the Great Reset. That you're going to actually carry on and agree to build the bullshit that they're telling you to build. So until you start turning around and saying, "No, thank you, I'm not interested in your shit. I don't want to buy your products. I don't want to participate in working on your building site to build that crappy house. Because I know if I help build that house, it's going to traumatize the next generation." It's already happening, basically. This latest generation, the youngest children now, are being introduced to a society where they are traumatized from the earliest age. That's going to create generation trauma. People talk about the baby boomers and Gen X and Gen Z and the millennials and whatever. Well, what's going on now is trauma generation trauma. And those youngsters, I know we could have endless arguments and debates about this, and it's sort of like predicting the future and blah, 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 and stereotyping everybody and labeling them all with the same brush and all that kind of shit. But I'm just saying it the way I feel it is. For the majority of them, they're going to be pretty much incapable of dealing with the level of thinking that's required to be able to pick through the bullshit that the system will push at them constantly. It will be beyond what George Orwell wrote about, where, the party's always right and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be Brave New World level of just absolute willing subjugation. It's going to be like the Eloi in the story of the time machine, where they just can't even comprehend of something, the Morlocks being bad people because they want to eat some of them every so often. Oh no, it's just the way that society is. That's the way society works. This youngest generation is going to be traumatized at such an early age, and the infrastructure of society is going to be so radically changed because they won't go to a building that we call school. They won't physically be interacting with other children or be around other adults that are called teachers or whatever. There'll be none of that. They'll be in a room with a screen and an interactive device of some kind of touch screen that they use, or a VR headset that they use. And they will be totally isolated in their thinking, which means they'll have a very solipsistic perception of reality because nothing exists beyond what is presented to them by the screen. Nothing will be allowed to exist that is outside of the state. If the state says 2 + 2 = 5, then that's what they write down on their multiple choice. Or they mark that answer on the multiple choice option. Does 2 + 2 = 4, 5, or banana? Yeah, it's well, they're certainly not going to put 4. They might put banana because good monkeys get bananas. You press the button, you get banana. Look into the work of Skinner. Was it Robert or Alfred Skinner? I can't remember now. Was that one psychologist that sort of continued the work of Pavlov in many ways? And he liked using pigeons primarily because he found them easier to work with. But you look into things like the Skinner box and his work on behavioral modification and how he could, create that kind of training program where most people would be unaware that they're being trained, or entrained, I should say more properly. They're unaware that they are being entrained to follow a pattern that would then become ingrained into their thinking, such that their thinking becomes incapable of being outside of the walls that has been built around it. That's a Skinner box. When you're in the box, your choices are press the button to get a banana or sit there and do nothing. Press the button, get a banana. You think it's free will choice, but it's not. It's like, what choice do you have? You're in a box and all there is one button that gives you a banana when you press the button. Yeah, I'm oversimplifying it and spoiling it. Look into this stuff for yourself, please. But that's basically it. We build the future that we're going to be sharing with each other. We build the world that we share with each other. So if you want to build a decent world, then you don't dump on the youngest generation in what may seem an insignificant way, but it all builds and builds and builds into a culture of trauma. When the kid stood there, all he wants is an ice cream on a nice summer day, and he's got the cash in his hand, and he's there, he's waited his turn in the queue, he's got to, and he goes, "Can I have an ice cream, please?" And the twat behind the counter just said, "No, credit cards only," to a 10-year-old kid. It's is this the society we're living in?
Ice cream.
The ice cream man is coming. And that's that Eddie Murphy sketch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ice cream man is coming. But that's I know that might seem a bit sort of, might seem very disjointed from the general news of what's been going on in the week. But this week, certainly here in the UK, I know that there was the incident with the stabbings in Reading, which I think should mention, but I strongly think that that was most likely somebody who was under surveillance and had a crazy episode, and they've just thought, oh, that's convenient. Yeah, we'll put that down as terrorism. Don't forget the terrorists, folks. Be afraid. They're under your bed. They're coming to get you. They're wearing face coverings. Oh, they're wearing face coverings.
Well, I think the local resident said the quote was politely was he's not right in the head. So one of them sort of maybe had issues.
He had an episode. He went off his head or whatever and decided to physically be attacking people. So I know people died. But
3 people. Yeah.
I haven't even looked at it in that kind of question of, well, is it even real? Could they possibly be faking it, hoaxing it, staging it, stuff like that? Because isn't it appropriate how at the time when a lot of people are feeling so, on edge to get out, and the official word is that, going back to work is going to start now, basically. The pubs will be opening again soon, so don't worry, all you alcohol fiends out there. Soon you'll be able to go back to the pub, but you'll have to learn to drink really, really, really quickly, because you're only going to be allowed to have 90 minutes before they tell you to leave. So if you're used to spending like 3, 4, 5 hours in the pub with one after the other, getting bladdered, you're going to have to do that in 90 minutes.
Well, I'm sure someone will give it a go.
I should have been lining up. So forget the yard of ale. Give me the 2 meters. I want the 2 meters of ale.
2 meter distancing ale thing, which is
you stand over there.
It's social distanced as well, so it actually works. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
2 meters of hydroponic tubing.
Yeah. Fill it with ale.
Yeah.
And off you go.
But there hasn't, I feel anyway, there certainly hasn't been exactly that much change here in the UK over the last week, other than them perpetuating the general level of confusion.
Yeah.
Kicking the can down the road, making some ambiguous, mostly empty statements about, well, we might change the rules soon, but we're not changing it yet, but we might do this, or maybe we'll do that. And okay.
It's the constant threat, as you said, the constant threat of infection or virus. And there's so many different names for it and whatever they use, whatever. And it's just, like I say, it's a constant threat. So it's always there. It's always going to be there now. Yeah. So they're getting local lockdowns, sort of like you said before, getting people to normalize to a local area. I know up in Anglesey, they're thinking about locking down that island because they've had 158 cases apparently, or positive tests. Again, I'm not sure about the testing, but this is what they're doing. So they're trying to suggest that could be, that whole island could be, shut off. Because that's like a spike in cases, and this is what they're saying. This is what Boris was saying not that long ago about how they're going to tackle it going forward, and they could be closing off just areas of a town, where you can't, go in or out, and those people there are isolated.
That perfectly suits. I can't remember how many weeks ago I was talking about this kind of thing. It was when they started to push the argument about the testing. And they were going to bring in the military to do the testing because the NHS wasn't able to do the job, basically. That's what they claimed. Like I said earlier, they set them up to fail so they could make these claims. But I argued at the time that the real reason they want to do this is so that they can have military on site in each of the different regions around the UK so that they can enact situations like that when and if they feel they want to, for whatever reason. They can say like this area, this borough, this street, this town, whatever is cordoned off because it's a plague zone. You can't go there. They'll have the military around it on the main road junctions and stuff like that, preventing people from entering certain areas.
Yeah, because you mentioned a lot about contact tracing apps, haven't we, over the last few weeks? And it's interesting that they haven't kind of got it right here in the UK just yet. I think
They
I read
gave
somewhere.
up on their
Yeah,
own.
I think Ireland are running one. But again, I'm not sure how successful and reliable, if at all, these things. They're just there to round you up, I think, and to get people to be used to being tracked
And
via
there
the
isn't.
excuse of a virus, which apparently changes its mind every day, apparently, where it is and where it goes. And if you're living in America, apparently you're only 1.8 meters apart, but in the UK it's 2 meters. So there's that little bit extra there that just says, well, it's okay in America. It doesn't jump that little bit more. It's
The
ridiculous,
American
isn't it?
virus.
Do
It
you know
can
what I'm
only jump
saying?
so far, yeah.
It's completely daft, and people have bought this thing hook, line, and sinker, it seems, and they're just, doing what's been asked of them when they're out and about, and not saying, well, actually, no, they're just guidelines, or I'm not going to do this, and then being refused entry maybe to the supermarket to buy your food if you don't agree to the terms and conditions for going in now. It's unbelievable.
That adds into that false sense of choice, or false sense of that you're making free will decisions of taking on board this track and trace bullshit, which you're not, because you are basically being left with no option, because the main industry producers are installing it as a standard, even though the tech was basically capable of doing this shit anyway in the first place.
Yeah.
But now they've got the public to acquiesce to the very concept that it will be done to them, and the industry is installing this stuff anyway. Like what I was talking about earlier, where the government themselves don't have to enact a law; they just have to put pressure on the business and the industries, and they will perform the action, and then the public, as the consumer, will just absorb the new reality.
Yeah.
So every new phone you buy will have this stuff installed on it automatically. Even if you've got an older-ish phone, like within the past several years, it will be updated to this new automated update version that will include the gubbins for the track and trace. So there isn't really any choice other than don't have a smart device. And when at the same time, other parts of the industries and business around you are changing the way they operate based on government advice and guidelines, then, like that poor child where you can't buy an ice cream with cash, you got to pay with your device, and your device has got the track and trace on it. You see how this false sense of choice creates the entrapment.
Yeah.
People think, oh, I'll buy an Android device because they're independent, they're decentralized, and all this. It's got it on it as well.
Yeah.
So they make you feel like the government is taking a step back. They've gone, oh, this is UK. They've gone, oh, we weren't capable of creating the software that would centralize the information. So instead, we're going to defer to the industry standards like Apple and Google and let them do it because they're so good at doing it. Revealing the reality that you live in a corporatocracy. In other words, it's big money interests. It's the corporations that operate the world. It's the banks that make the decisions, not the politicians that you supposedly employ to do that job within your society. No, they're just salesmen.
Yeah. Well, limit the choice of what choice you do have. They're constantly trying to squeeze it even more and more and more now. And really, it's just the corporate choice. You like say the survival of the high street. In that sense, or what normal or shops.
It's near enough gone. And
yeah, I mean, the shops apparently opened up here today, and I had a little wander around, and it was just quiet. Not many shops were actually open. There was a few, but not many.
same here.
Some have decided to come. Some have to open up. I think because there's not many visitors or tourists or that sort of thing, or that kind of movement you get in these areas and stuff. It's just all quiet. It's just literally a written off summer. It's a bit like the bars in Spain, as we said last week, in Benidorm and these popular sort of UK tourist summer retreats, whatever, summer places to go. They're open, but there's no one there. There's just because there's no one's going. So places have opened again, so everybody will feel this effect for next summer, for the next round of people when they want to go away, and then we'll see where we're at then with if people can even want to go away anyway because of all the bullshit, the trauma they've got. People might want to never leave the UK anyway. There's that. There's the people who will see the price rises go up and they'll be put off by that because travel will get a bit more expensive because of the way that they're distancing. I see EasyJet was setting up their planes again and flying them all fully stocked, but with people. But if there's a second wave, you see, it's this second wave thing people keep going on about, and you know that they keep pushing that in the background, second wave, and we've been talking about it, how they've sort of planting it in people's minds that there will be another, round of this coming, and then maybe we'll see more restrictions, like the airlines, for instance, not being able to sit everybody in there like that. They will have to rip seats out and do whatever they need to do to limit the amount of people and raise prices because of it. And yeah, so there's a lot could still happen.
If you can only carry half the number of passengers, then those passengers have got to bear the extra cost of all those empty seats.
Yeah, and I said there's a lot still we don't know how people are going to react. It looks like they're reacting, to me, in general, with all the rules, and they're going along with it. Majority of people are still, but a lot of people are saying under their breath, "This is bloody bullshit, isn't it?" Yeah, we all know it's bullshit. Everybody's saying that, so that I know anyway. I
think for the majority of people in that kind of situation, it's because of the threat of fines more than anything else.
Yeah.
There might be a bit of the kind of peer pressure of, they're worried of what their neighbours will think of them, or they're worried about being called a idiot and shit like that. They're worried about that kind of social peer pressure effect. But I think really the majority of what is making people go along with it is the fear of getting a fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they gave the police almost like free rein for the first few weeks. They went, yeah, get out there and do it, go on, get them. So that created a fear.
Well, it does. I mean,
just to say this is in the same way as the second wave thing. I think, it's quite possible that there will never be a second wave, but them constantly talking about it reinforces the fear and creates the justification that there needs to be that constant option hovering over you, like the sword of Damocles, is that constant option of, if there is a second wave, then lockdown. So just by mentioning second wave, they're getting people to tacitly acquiesce to having that option on the table ready to go if it comes back again.
Yeah. Well, I went into a local shop on Friday, and speaking to the person in there, saying, because we had to make an appointment to go. Yeah,
to shop for local people.
And she was saying that she was opening, but trading standards and people like that have been onto them. But then they've said, well, other places are allowed to open, just like we've mentioned. Like, why is it Marks and Spencers can open, but you can't have a market? Like an outdoor thing, or you can't have. It can happen there, but not there. It's just it's ridiculous.
The corporate outlets
people see that. Yeah, go on.
The corporate outlets have got magic immunity.
Yeah.
You can't get the virus when you go to Tesco's, but you can get the virus when you go to, Jonesy's butchers on the high street or whatever.
It's just ridiculous. And she was saying that, they've been had a little bit of hassle, but they've opened like a bit earlier because they were supposed to open Monday, you see. So some of them have been opening earlier last week. Some businesses have decided, right, sod it. This is ridiculous now. We're losing so much money, or if we don't start trading now, we're going to just, have a really difficult, time. So they've gone ahead and started to do it, and it's interesting. So some people do get it, and I said to her, it's guidelines still for you guys, isn't it? It's not the law. It's not the law. They can tell you open and shut, in a sense. So, but they're onto it. A lot of the retailers and people like her, and obviously she knows other people. And people that is seeing through this and seeing that it is silly and it doesn't make sense, and people are overreacting, and we need to, like I say, whatever comes off the back of this economically because of it, and all the rest of it, this is when they're going to start to really, turn the thumb screws up on us if Like I say, we don't know how the housing market's going to be. Banks, hyperinflation. Not trying to sound doom and gloom, by the way, but this is what could happen. It's going to happen when the interest rate's been as low as it has been for so many years. That's just going to go, it's going to start going up and up and up. And then you're going to get problems with people being able to pay their bills and debts, and you're just going to get a huge amount of, grief and stuff. So it's what's about to come. It's like how many people own a house and have a mortgage. There's millions of people, millions. I can't put millions of people in that kind of bullshit pressure. So something about this great reset you talk about, or sorry, they've been talking about, or you mentioned, and we mentioned it last week as well. We didn't get a chance to go through it properly on Wednesday, but the website there, I don't know if we dropped the link in there, where they've got all their propaganda and all their stuff being presented to you, as this is what we need to do, this is where we go in, this is how it's, this is how it is now because of the pandemic and the COVID-19 crisis. This is our perfect opportunity now to, take the reins and go the direction we need to go and stop this and stop that and do this and take these chances now to really fuck your life up, in a sense. So, we know it's all, if it goes that direction, where they want it to go, we've got to push the other way, like you say, and not, people know, like say underground, it's just a question of, are they seeing the legitimacy in the political system still? Do they still think that works for them? Do they still think that system is real and it does the right thing and it produces democracy in the right way, in an honest way, and all the rest of it? Are they really? They cannot say yes. No one can say yes to that unless you be democracy, democracy scam, all the rest of it. And they see what they've been under now. I've seen that they've been had by some kind of, like I say, Bill Gates pandemic, or whatever it is, and seeing how the medical establishment have almost taken over the government in a kind of hijack of like, we'll just follow you guys. And, we don't know who's in charge. It's all confusion. Boris is saying one thing in England, Wales is doing a completely different thing, and so is Scotland. So, but they all vote for Boris. So it makes a scam of it all, really. And if people can't see the bullshit of it all, then
along those lines,
what can I say?
It's a perfect opportunity for me to present a public service announcement, a PSA. I'll just play it. It's not very long. I thought this when they put it up the other day. I thought it'd be worth clipping out just that one bit, and then he did upload just this one bit. You'll get what I mean when I play it. But this is just in case, because and I've personally experienced this as well with family members and whatever. You might get accused of sharing difficult information for people. So, if you share a link with someone, or you send them a document or something, and they look at you as if you just shaved their cat, as if to say, what are you sharing crazy information? And we talked about the infodemic element of the campaign, and some of the stuff that's talked about at Event 201 and whatever. But this is something that, I'll call this a PSA. I'll shut up and play it.
So what do you do when this happens? A loved one, say your dad, drops into the family group chat with something that he thinks is real. It's something about how everyone in the world will need an experimental mRNA vaccine to protect us from coronavirus. There's a link to the CBC with a message calling it scary stuff. So what do you do with this? Do you ignore it? Do you call him out saying how ridiculous you think it is?
If you do that to your dad, you've actually shamed him. My name is Talking Head. I'm the worldwide director of prestigious sounding front organization, which gives an air of legitimacy to a random person telling you how to think and act. What happens is that your dad doubles down on his view and dismisses what you're saying.
So hold back on all that reactive talk. Maybe try something like this. Yeah, these are scary times. We're all a bit afraid, but let's be careful. What you're sharing is inaccurate, and it feeds into that fear that we all feel.
Everybody's anxiety is so heightened right now. People are sharing this stuff not for any malicious reasons, but because they're scared too.
Sending more context could be a good move, but don't drown them in evidence. Maybe try sending an article from a legitimate source, including credible scientists, on why an mRNA vaccine is experimental, untested, unproven technology that will change you at the genomic level, and that the only vaccine ever developed against coronavirus actually made people more susceptible to infection. Mainstream media narratives can be just as infectious as any coronavirus, so you need to guard against them.
It's very easy just to mute your crazy MSM-believing friend on Twitbookgram, or to leave a TickSnap group where people are sharing establishment propaganda. But right now, I think there's actually a kind of responsibility for all of us to share the Corbett Report's new documentary, Who is Bill Gates? So they will realise how deep the deception goes, and how all of the establishment sources that they believe in are funded by the eugenicists who are admittedly using their wealth to reduce the world's population.
There you go.
Interesting. Yeah.
PSA. And I'd love. I don't know whether to bother like posting a comment to question it, but it's just like, hang on, where is it?
Media narratives can be.
What exactly is he doing with this? It's like, what on earth is this? And he's just about to pour something into it, and what? And I don't know whether he's done that deliberately as like an ironic dig at the original that they're parodying. You know, because the original's got the woman stood in a kitchen and whatever, you know, make it look all homey kind of thing, you know, as if it's genuine. Yeah, they're speaking as just a person in their own home and all that kind of shit.
Yeah,
it's just like the ridiculousness of what the hell is this contraption? What is he doing?
well, I was saying when he mentioned the Bill Gates thing, it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know,
please do when you get the chance. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, it's still on his channel, James Corbett.
Have a look.
Yeah, go to his website, because then you can avoid the YouTube crap, the GooTube bullshit, and you can download the whole documentary from his website if you want to, so you can share it. You get a copy for yourself, share it with others. I really do suggest, I don't promote people. I'm not paid to promote anyone. I'm not, paid to do any of that kind of bullshit. That's not what I'm about. I just talk about things that I think are worth people's time. And if you don't know anything about the sheer amount of information that's out there to back this up, it's not just crazy speculation. There is a wealth of documented evidence and paper trail.
And that's what is important for people to really remember, because the BBC and other sources of so-called information and news are telling you the complete opposite about Bill Gates, saying all these are just conspiracy theories that people are talking about, his involvement with vaccine experimentations and setting up vaccine programs in Africa and India. They're just saying that's all just conspiracy. That's absolute bollocks. That's the paper trail that you wouldn't believe. It's just, come on. And the BBC will tell you that we know you're a conspiracy theorist, and so they're just out and out shutting people down. So if that's your only source of info, and that's where people are trying to establish a reasonable sort of like like this is real, this is my source of information, then I'm sorry, you just but that's what they're doing. That's what they're trying to do. And there's just as many people are not reading that and thinking for themselves as another half who are reading that article in the BBC telling you Bill Gates is a wonderful man and he'll never do anything like that, and you're just terrible people for suggesting it. How dare you? It's that fucking bullshit. People have to get out of their fucking heads. And these organizations like the Beeb and others are just, they will be called out and accountable going forward in the future, when people do realize what these people are all really about and what this is all leading to, or what they want it to lead to. Us all under one control, one thing, all track traced and nicely audited and in line, and burn off the ones they don't like with viruses and stuff. It's like this is the sort of stuff that people need to just realize. And don't look at the mainstream as just literally as toxic as shit. It's awful. I can't really say much more about mainstream. Been talking about it for years, and how toxic and lying and full of crap it is, and how it NLPs every article and never tells you the truth ever, just like a politician or a talking head from the the news or whatever. They're all the same. So just pushing the same shite down your throat constantly every day, and you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to find anything out. You're going to be lost in a haze of shit. Sorry, just ranting.
He says that quite well on there. Yeah. My name's Talking Head. from
Yeah.
a corporate company that makes you
Mm.
feel like I've got some kind of legitimacy to tell you
Yes.
stuff. Yeah.
I suck corporate titty daily, and I'm going to tell you the corporate thing is wonderful. Exactly. It's just wow. And it is like watching a movie now. We're living in the movie. We're living in that movie we watched 20 years ago, or 15 years ago. We're here now with it, and it's
In terms of the BBC, I had yet another letter from them recently. The usual thing. Even though I've told them repeatedly I don't want their license and I don't require their license, but they still keep sending me the letters. So
well, yeah.
even their claim that you can get in touch with them and let them know that you don't need a license, even if you do that, they still keep sending you the bullshit. In terms of that as well, I'll repeat what I said the other week, I think it was last week, about the statues. That statue outside BBC House.
Oh yes, the
One of the
paedophile man.
pedo,
Yeah.
And we talked about this recently with them pulling statues down and whatever, and a lot of people had called for that one to be taken down from the BBC House. And I said, no, really, you don't want it taken down, because the very fact that that's there provides solid evidence of what the BBC is really and what it represents. When you combine that evidence with the evidence about how they protected Jimmy Savile and others,
Yeah.
then it proves what they are. So it should stay where it is until the entire institution of the BBC is dismantled. Then take it down. When that building is, repurposed for some other business or what, then take it down. But for now, that kind of stuff is better left there as evidence. I argued that kind of thing about all the statues in terms of the world is a living museum. Whenever you start pulling things out of it like that, you begin the process of segregating chunks of history, which is a dangerous thing to do. While those things are there, they provide evidence for us to, make use of in a learning process. The fact that the statue of Churchill, for example, is always my favourite one to talk about. That figure in terms of UK history is so prevalent. Even that one, I'd say no, it needs to stay where it is so that future generations can see the reality that in previous generations, people adored that guy so much, even though what we know, or what they probably then knew about him, they still wanted to erect a statue to him, which is an indicator of the social mind of the time. The culture of the
it's
time.
interesting. You said
it was a good thing.
You said about the sociopathic society, that they're creating, and we said like narcissistic and everything else about society. The way that they program you from birth, the way that you're educated in a way, or you're shown the world in a certain way, and molded as a kid. And when you said about the way the new type of education is going to sort of be for children, that separation, that no friends, virtual friends, mind you. You can have friends online, many as you want.
Pixels.
Yeah, pixels on a screen, but no actual, real friends, real life friends in front of you, and that is, like I've always said, that if you bring up the children, then the society is going to reflect that, and we're going through that at the moment through the last 20 years, since millennia, since the digital age really blasted on the scene. 20 years ago, it was a huge boom, of digitalness, all the bullshit.
I do think we are already experiencing the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
A lot of the talk recently has been trying to present this idea that the fourth industrial revolution is still coming, as in it's going to be when they transition to transhumanism and stuff like that. And I think that's going to be the fifth, because what we've experienced since the advent of the internet, since they put the internet into the public, is the equivalent kind of radical social change that occurred after the other industrial revolutions. It completely changes the way society operates, and that's what we're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
The fourth industrial revolution has been that transition to a digital age, a digital currency, a digital environment, a virtualized society.
Gulag.
Yeah, yeah, the virtual gulag of you earn your credits by how many times you click on the pixels on the screen. That is a digital gulag.
Yeah.
The amount of people now, because I've talked about this kind of thing a few times over the years, and I know because we've been chatting for years, but
Yeah.
I still do play computer games, but in the past, like 10 plus 20 years ago, I was really into the computer game stuff. And this is why it makes me laugh when people call me a Luddite and whatever, and that I'm anti-technology in some fashion. It's like, you got no fucking idea.
He was a gamer.
Yeah, right. But I've watched how that industry itself has grown, and now it's pretty much, it certainly is far beyond the general media. It's far outstripping movies and TV programs and whatever, entertainment media wise. But it's also the reality of how it's changed a lot of how society operates in a general sort of economic day-to-day sense, because the sheer number, there were literally millions upon millions of them, of people who earn a living by doing nothing but uploading content that's in some way related to gaming. Either they're writing game reviews or they're filming themselves playing a game and uploading that, what they call let's play, where basically you're watching somebody else playing a game. There are literally millions of YouTube channels that are just that.
Yeah.
And the people are earning a living from the usual YouTube kind of monetization and whatever. I don't know, it's, for some of them it's got harder because of the censorship and the restrictions and blah blah blah, but really that is a clear demonstration that you've gone through another industrial revolution, because now the majority of the populace are no longer working in a physical production facility that creates a physical commodity that is traded. No, now they work in some kind of digital virtual format, and they're trading virtualized commodities. There's no real physical existence to them. It's just a chunk of data.
Yeah. Or enables you to play the game better or something.
Yeah. That's why I still watch some of them every so often. It's just like, I want to know a particular thing about a game. So I just go online, look it up, lo and behold, there's a video of somebody explaining that thing in the game. Yeah.
That screen addiction, isn't it? I mean, and it holds you, as you're a kid, I remember Atari, Space Invaders, that when I was about, how old was I when that come out? About 15, 16, maybe, something like that, when that hit the market. And I didn't really get hooked into gaming because I just thought that was boring after a while. Play it a few times and it was pretty basic, as you know. But as things move forward, I remember buying a PlayStation 1 that was in the 90s, mid 90s or whatever. And it wasn't a new one. I bought a secondhand one and got a bit addicted to that, I must admit, for quite a few months. I think I went out and spent about 400 quid on games in about, a few weeks. So you see how it drags you in. You're suddenly spending all this money.
It is.
But then something, I think the older you are, maybe something clicks in your head, and it did with me, that I just didn't go back to it. I just stopped it, and it was in my 30s then, and I thought, I'll do something else, or whatever, So it's kind of it faded away, that kind of addiction, if you like, because it is an addiction. It is like something that really gets you, because it's a comfort to the brain. It makes you feel good while you're playing it. It's all that good stuff, and people enjoy it and relax and all the rest of it. So I can see where the draw is, but
the main thing that still gets me is the kind of like puzzle solving effect.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in the sense of like you're looking at a jigsaw puzzle, or you're looking at some kind of like equation that you have to try and figure out, or whatever. Puzzles don't necessarily have to be in that kind of style or format anymore with modern gaming. But it's the level of figuring out how to do something, figuring out how to beat a quest in the game and stuff like that. That is in effect problem solving. And I think that's a big reason of why it can be addictive to people.
Yeah.
because it replaces what we used to do in the real world in the sense of problem solving to create a plan of how to acquire food, basically.
Yeah.
To go right deep into the brain's core matter of our drives, what drives us. It's the same process of a hunter figuring out a plan of action of how he's going to catch that game, or track down that deer that he's been after, or whatever. That's a problem solving thinking process, and most computer games rely on that in one way or another. And I think it's that draws a lot of people in. It gives them, in effect, it's like, again, like digital gulag. It gives their brain something to chew on.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the problem, you see, because the kids, I mean, that disconnection problem with, they've got the, little mind, it's like a sponge, child's mind. It absorbs everything. Give it shiny, bright things and flashy lights and moving screens. It's on it. You know what, like little kids, they want to get on your smartphone. They want to, if you've got any little kids in your family and you got, it's the same old thing. They're attracted to it and they love it. Problem is, it's not giving them the real. And we said this years ago. How it will. You've got to have both. You've got to have a real experience, and as children, real experiences. Like going to a farm and being out in nature. But problem is, this thing just takes over and gives them that as a virtual reality. But it's not giving you what you need. It's not filling up that experience in deep in your soul or in your spirit. Where you're really getting that experience of being outdoors or wherever you are as a child and stuff. So it's kind of really sad that doesn't happen now, or not much. It seems stuck in the room playing games all day.
I think and I feel that that's something that's only really applicable to an adult mind. To the child's mind, they're not really, the majority of children certainly are not having concepts of feeding the soul. They just know.
No, but what I'm saying is, go on.
They just know it feels good. They're enjoying themselves. They feel happy, contented, etc.
Yeah.
And that's where the replacement. And again, this is, I think, indicative of the fourth revolution, because we're going from a process where physical activity would give you the feedback that would create the chemical connection in your biology that would make you connect that sense of feeling good. So you succeeded in tracking down the game you were after. That gives you a rush of endorphins and dopamine and blah, blah, blah. You've succeeded, so you feel good, you feel confident and successful, etc. Whereas now, and it just occurred to me because I thought it connects well with the example I was talking about earlier, the kid trying to buy the ice cream. That child will now associate trying to buy ice cream with cash to a sense of failure, a sense of insecurity, a sense of trauma. Whereas they go online and they click a few buttons and they get a digital ice cream from clicking a few buttons, their brain will release a bit of dopamine because they've succeeded in the gameplay or whatever. So their brain will learn to replace that sensation of success with the data that is being presented to them by the screen. So rather than, in another example, think of it as like baking a cake. For me, when I was growing up, my parents were really good at teaching me this kind of, basic skills, but things like baking a cake. And at the end of it, there was that sense of satisfaction that, you pull it out the oven and it's worked and you got the recipe right. And you got a cake, and then you get to eat it. And it's, it tastes great, wonderful. Way. That's that chemical connection which secures the thinking process. It connects all those neural chains together solidly that says, if you follow this process, this plan of action that requires these physical activities, and then at the end of it, you get your reward. That's how our biology has developed our thinking. Yeah. It's that feedback loop of success and reward, etc. Whereas again, now, most children, a lot of children, will get that sensation of success from a digital pixel data creation, something just non-physical whatsoever. So you're going to have a whole generation growing up where their brain is being altered. And I know you know, I've ranted about this kind of shit for years now. Their brain is being radically altered by the usurpation of that process and replacing physical reality activities with pseudo reality activities that occur in a digital space.
Mm.
So the child won't know any reality different. The child, if you took them out doing something like going hunting, or if you took them in the kitchen and said, I'm going to teach you how to bake a cake and you'll love doing it and you'll have fun, and they'll hate it because they'll get no chemical response in the process because their chemical response has been entrained to the pixels on the screen.
Yeah, and that's the way. I mean, if, like I say, if we don't get the balance right, that's what the society is just going to be.
Yeah.
Idiocracy, isn't it, going forward in the sense where it's not going to have any real experience of anything, or just even, like you say, when they've moved from the analog or the doing world, or when you get active and do things and get involved, turned it into the digital world, which is just sit back, relax, and they do it all for you.
Yeah.
Now, where's the learning in that? You know, where's the experiences of things? Like you say, you get the dopamine hits, but you're not going to get the actual, you know, it'll be like, what's that movie where they implant memories into you and stuff? Can't remember the name of it. But anyway, yeah, Total Recall, that one.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you know, that sort of shit, you know, going forward where they can make you believe you had an actual experience. It's just whatever, but being actually there at the time, in the present moment now, living, you know, as we should be in our sovereign, sentient, grounded way, you know, having these experiences day in, day out, and experiencing something. And as a child, or it's up to the adults going forward, you know, if you have children, you know, you have to give them both those experiences, and sitting them in front of the screen is, yeah, I mean, it's well, I don't think it's good now going forward at all for children, but you know, the way they've set this thing up, it's virtually impossible for them not to have access, or that's the way they set up society digitally, so they have to be involved in it. They will be involved. They are the ones that, like you say, trying to, you know, get this type of, you know, just digital, you know, reality there and nothing else, you know.
I was going to say, I think it depends which direction you scream.
Yeah.
In that, I scream for the future. You know, do you scream in desperation that you know, it's just hurtling that direction and there's nothing you can do about it, or do you scream at it, like to point at it to say what it is?
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like screaming a warning to everybody else, like, look at that crazy shit.
Let's go outside. Let's go outside. You know, let's go outside instead and do something. It's the summer, for goodness sake. You know, but you know, that's seems to be, like I say, the way they've set this whole pandemic thing up as well. We're getting people, you know, everything online, work from home, all this stuff, you know, limiting your connections and contacts with others. Same with the children, you know, going forward, normalizing this type of society, being, you know, worried about, you know, constant fear of an infection or virus about to break out. So we must follow all these, you know, all these guidelines.
People are dangerous.
Oof, you know.
Which is something like, you know, again, it's one of them things where it's like they're telling you something that's an oxymoron almost. It's like, yeah, people can be dangerous, but that's been true throughout history. It's just the dangers presented in different ways. You know, now it's you're given this impression that people are dangerous just by their very existence, because they'll pass on the illness to you in some fashion, or they'll pass on a mental illness to you by giving you misinformation or some shit.
Yeah.
Crazy conspiracy theory to infect your mind.
And it's presented in 1 meter, 2 meter rules, and keep away. You know, it's not good to be too. I mean, I think normally people don't do that anyway when they're walking around. Generally, they walk around people. It's not what we do. We don't go barging past people shoulder to shoulder, and you know, that kind of. Yeah, go on.
The average personal space is 3 feet. That's been true for however long, since sort of kind of like psychological studies began, really. So you're talking nearly 100 years.
Yeah.
It's true for the majority of people that approximately 3 feet is considered personal space. You don't go within 3 feet unless you have some kind of personal relationship with that person.
Yeah.
Some people break that rule. I've encountered a few over the years who like to be like that close to you when they talk to you for some weird reason. But
Oh,
the
yeah.
majority of people know it's approximately 3 feet. You'll stay about 3 feet apart in general. Yeah?
Or if someone's pushing past you to try and reach for the something in the supermarket, like
Yeah.
literally, they've seen it, and yeah, I mean, you get all that going on still in the supermarkets. It's so ridiculous how they've laid these places out now in the shopping centres. We mentioned this last few weeks, but yeah, it's just going out day to day and seeing the nonsense of it. And you can't walk that way, walk that way. I'm walking the other way. There's no one saying you can't. It's just go the other way. It's
I
just
still,
ridiculous.
I still like my idea. I'm sure
Mm.
somebody will rip it off at some point. So I'll say it now. I'm putting it out there. I'm sure somebody could turn it into a little app that they could sell, as a business idea. But if you have an app that has the beeping noise that vehicles make when they're reversing, so when you're walking down the aisles in the supermarket and you realise, I forgot to pick up so and so that was like back behind you,
Yeah.
rather than turning round and breaking the rules by going the wrong way, just press your little app and starting beep beep and just reverse and just back up. I'm reversing and reverse beep 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 beep, and then it's semantics, yeah. But it means when the shop assistant comes in, you're going the wrong way. It's like, no, I'm not, mate. I'm facing the right way. I'm reversing. There's nothing in your rules that says I can't reverse. So, fuck you and your stupid rules. I'm following your rules, mate. I'm just reversing. Don't stand behind me. Beep, beep, beep.
And flatten the curve.
Yeah. Stop eating the donuts.
Yeah,
You'll flatten the curve.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's mental, isn't it? Just everybody seems, like I say, just I can't believe it's going to carry on like this. I mean, the advice I think was it Dr. Rock said last week, if you get on the bus and say to the driver, do you want me to wear this? Well, I said to that, I tried that, and he said, yeah, have you seen the sign on the door? You got to. So he's a bit of a grumpy driver. So I said, I ask all the drivers, and he said, I'm just doing my job, and he was one of those drivers. So yeah, so that wasn't a great experience, but I will try it again. Maybe get a nicer driver. Some of them are a bit miserable around here.
I'll remind people as well that those face masks are an opportunity to put a message. So just think about it from that point of view. You could write something on that mask and then walk around wearing it, and you hopefully planting some seeds for people.
Yeah,
might trigger a few, but that's still planting a seed.
Well, I liked Gary's idea. Wear a T-shirt with someone wearing a mask on it on the T-shirt.
You wear a mask, yeah, mate. Look, I'm wearing a mask. You have a photograph of yourself wearing a mask on a T-shirt. Are you wearing a mask? Yeah, look, I've got the picture. Look, see. All right. It's a good. It's good to take the piss a bit and let some of that energy out and show them that we're not afraid of their bullshit, because that's a lot of what, well, if not the majority, if not all of what they rely on, is people being afraid in one way or another, afraid of this, that, or the other. So having a bit of a laugh is a good way of letting them know that you are not afraid. Sorry, I was scrolling back up the chart. Just noticed the question. Cookie from Dinny. Cookies. Trump is not buying the piss. I guess you mean in terms of like Trump is sort of he makes overtures of how he's sort of trying to counteract the push for some of the restrictions, like the mask wearing and stuff like that. And although, yes, I know what you mean, I certainly feel that I can see the kind of thing you mean, in the sense of he seems to be speaking against it in many ways. But at the same time, I'll just go back to what I've said about him all along. He's not genuine. He's not there to help you. It's just more of the games of the scamdemic, of the democracy scam. It was another one of the usual names. He's not your friend. He's not going to fix the problem. If it was possible to fix these problems through political methods, considering we've had the same political structure for 200 plus years, it's not going to happen that way. And even if he was genuine, they'd get rid of him in some fashion. They'd take him out of power in some way. So even if he might say a few good things, even if he might, say some things against the narrative or whatever, nah. I'm not buying the political bullshit anymore. So fuck Trump and the wagon he rolled in on, and the wagon that he will drive people over a cliff with as well. He serves that purpose. There has to be two opposing forces so that you believe the game and that you feel that you have to pick one side or the other, so they get you in that left-right motion and keep you moving and marching in the direction that they want. And he perfectly suited the times because he co-opted and appropriated the online demographics, which was why when he started his campaign, he was dropping hints that hooked in the conspiracy demographic, because by that time, in like, what was it, 2014, this conspiracy demographic on the internet had become one of the main media demographics. It's up there with celebrity gossip.
Yeah, people were trawling it and looking at it, and
we experienced it because we saw the effect it had on YouTube.
Yeah,
the way they brought in their YouTube megastars and appropriated the conspiracy genre and turned it into a pile of shit. Yeah, and they're still crapping in that punch bowl continuously now, like they've got a severe case of fucking gastroenteritis.
And now they've signed up to platforms like Spotify and multi-million-dollar deals, and spreading their shite there as well. So
Chuck E. Cheese recycling pizza.
Yeah.
Let's trot out yet another bullshit story about how the Beatles were really aliens and whatever. Any old crazy shit. Mandela effect. And
yeah. Well, we could go on and on and on about this, by the way. We haven't got time now, but yes, we could ramble on for an hour about this, but
maybe you could say that sort of triggers me when people try to suggest that Trump's on our side. It's like, no, stop it.
There's a lot of information, good information within a lot of things, and it's being able to discern and being able to look at it in a more, look at the bigger picture, look at what these people are like and do, and make your own mind up. And it's always good to have someone thinking, oh yeah, there are white hats in there doing some good things. I'd like to think so myself. I'd like to think that I would. I'd like to think this is all we, but whatever. But we can't just think that this is the moment. This is the guy who's gonna do it. I don't know, and I like to think that we've already been had with this nonsense of the pandemic and the naivety and the goodwill of the people and everything else. They're always taking the mick and taking advantage of us, the people, and getting us to defuse and go one way and do nothing, whilst we're all walking around behaving like we're living in North Korea.
Yeah. Well, thanks to everyone for joining in.
Sorry about that. It was a bit of a rant at the end. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Yeah.
You're saying the right thing.
Yeah.
I was partly distracted scrolling back up through the chat, but as per usual, it only goes back so far. So apologies if you're in the sort of previous bit that I can't reach at the moment. I was going to say hello to all the ones that I can see in what I've got of the chat room at the moment. Tazzy's still posting links in there. Thanks, Taz, for doing that. Thanks for putting the links in. And Bright77, hello. And Lion Share, hello. Electoral forms soon. Oh, yeah, of course. Didn't really mention that. A lot of this stuff could be leading up towards the elections and Trump trying to get re-elected.
Oh, yeah. Just quickly mention that speech he did. It was today. It seems to God, he's such a showman. I don't know if you only one managed. It was on for an hour, and I watched about 5 minutes of it, and that was enough, because it's just the way he is and how he presents the stories he tells to his adoring fans, because he's going for re-election, isn't he? And it's all this stuff happening. So, yeah. But what a showman he is. You have to take, you have to say he is. Like I say, he doesn't want to play the game card, and he was saying, which is true. He's not playing the game, so he's going against the grain.
Playing his own game.
He's playing his own game, exactly. Yeah.
Canao, hello. Thanks for joining in the chat. And scroll down. So South, hello. And Rogue Penguin Scotland, hello. Hope you're all right up there in Scotland. It's probably getting a bit cold for penguins. Especially the rogue ones that get pushed out into the cold. I think I did say hello to everyone else. I'm scrolling down quick, but I remember saying hello to most of you lot at the start that are still there in the chat. So thanks for joining in and participating. Yeah, I'm scrolling. Dino, hello. Fresh green straight off the frying rack. You're me. Yeah, definitely. And hello to all the people who are watching that don't join in the chat. I know there's quite a few people that are still there watching as well. Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to scroll quicker. Dotty, hello. The artist formerly known as the Dot. Yeah, I think I'll scroll back down to the bottom now. So thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for giving us your attention for a couple of hours approximately. We'll be back on Wednesday night with a reality chat on the Reality Chat channel. Maybe we'll pull up some more like news articles and stuff and talk about stuff again.
Yeah.
And I think as far as I know, Steve's on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Steve Tagoose. Check out the mystery show. And there's plenty of other good stuff out there. So don't think nobody's saying anything. There are lots of people speaking out. And I'm sure that a lot of you are saying your thing when you get the chance as well. Don't get yourself into trouble too much anyway. Main thing is to be able to keep the information going and keep yourself going.
Mm-hmm.
And we will see you again soon.
Thanks, Cookie. Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Thanks for joining in, right? Cat cheese. I'm going to click the button.